So you've spent all this time building an amazing, robust, easy-to-use app, but there's one thing you can't control. What happens when the internet goes down? Buttons stop working, data gets lost, and users get frustrated. In a world where constant connectivity isn't guaranteed, relying solely on an online database can be a major problem. But what if your app can continue working seamlessly offline, store data locally, and then automatically sync everything when the internet is back? Or maybe you're building an app that needs to work where internet coverage is low or non-existent. That's exactly what we'll cover in today's video. We'll explore how to build an offline first app using an amazing tool coupled with Supabase, ensuring a smooth and reliable experience no matter the network conditions. Now, today's video is going to be divided into three parts. In the first part, we are going to look at the problem and the solution. And the second part, I want to introduce you to an amazing tool that will make your apps a lot more robust to your users. And in the final part of the video, I'm going to be showing you a fully working proof of concept app that I built that shows you this amazing always on functionality in action. And so let's talk about building always on apps. So first we have a problem. What happens when there is no internet? Okay. And so this can happen in all kinds of different situations, right? You can be moving from one room to another and lose your Wi-Fi temporarily. You can go outside, lose your Wi-Fi and still not regain, mobile connectivity. Okay. Or you can be in an area that has low to maybe non-existent internet connectivity. Okay. There's all kinds of situations. And so first we have the connectivity breakdown, right? Apps that rely on live internet connection can't access or update data when offline. Okay. So we have user experience disruption. Users experience slow performance or errors leading to frustration. And we also have data loss and inconsistency. Changes made during disconnection may be lost or cause conflicts when connectivity returns. And the way to solve this problem is by building offline first apps. Okay? And so what is an offline or an always on app? Okay, so we need local data storage. We need to be able to store data locally on the device so users can continue working without internet. And this provides seamless functionality. The app remains fully functional regardless of connectivity. We also need automatic syncing. Once the internet is available, local changes automatically sync with the remote Supabase database. And we also have enhanced reliability. This ensures that data consistency and improves overall user experience by reducing downtime. Now let's think how this syncing needs to work, right? Because there's lots of things that needs to be happening behind the scenes to ensure a super responsive, super rewarding user experience. Okay. So first, offline transactions and local queue. So all users' actions, inserts, updates, deletes are stored locally as transactions. Okay. Connectivity detection. The app continuously monitors network status and detects when internet becomes available. On reconnection, the queue changes are automatically uploaded to Supabase. And we also have real-time updates. The app listens for remote changes, inserts, update, deletes, and updates local database accordingly, right? This is the reverse sync. If something happens with your remote database, the app downloads it and syncs it correctly. And here I have a diagram that kind of shows you how this works. Here's a bigger diagram, right? So we have our app here, we have our backend here, and in the middle, we have this service from an amazing tool called PowerSync, which I'm going to be covering in just a couple of moments to show you exactly how this works. And so the idea here is that we are going to be using a local database. Right? This whole time, assuming that we have a very good and stable internet connection, we are going to be syncing it to our backend. Okay. So the user is interacting with this local database. we are automatically syncing all the changes to our backend. And so if we are offline for an extended amount of time, the user is going to be interacting with this local database. They're not even going to be aware that we've lost internet connection. And once we regain internet connectivity, we can simply upload all the changes to our backend, as well as download all the other changes that might have been done by somebody else, right? If we are building an app that can be used by multiple users, right? A multi-user app. And in the middle, we have this amazing service that ensures this data is correctly synced, right? Because there's lots of things that can possibly go wrong. And we need a very reliable service that ensures this data consistency, right? So that way we can avoid data corruption. Okay, very, very important. Now, the tool that we're going to be using to make all of this magic happen is called PowerSync. And this video is not sponsored by PowerSync. This is just a tool that I've discovered, and it ended up working really, really well. Now, you can go on GitHub and you can learn more about this tool. But in a nutshell, what this tool allows you to do is it allows you to sync different databases. Okay, so it says here, backend to SQLite sync engine. Okay, build local first apps with instantly responsive UI, UX, and simplified state transfer. Okay, so the idea is, when you use this tool, your app gets a SQLite database. Okay, so if you're not familiar with SQLite, SQLite is a database that resides on just one file. Okay, so it's stored locally with your app. Okay, so when you use PowerSync, your app automatically gets this SQLite database that it uses for storage. But it also syncs with another database of choice that you can configure, and you can have a multi-user app that way, okay? Because then all the apps that you build, they get this little database, embedded database, but they can all be syncing to some remote backend, okay? And so you can kind of learn more about this tool, how it works, right? Connects to backend databases in a non-invasive way. Control which data is synced with which users, right? This is something we're going to be talking about in just a second. You have this dynamic partial replication, sync users example. So you can decide, right, like which users should be getting their data synced. And I'm going to show you all of that in just a second. Work with local SQLite database that syncs automatically. Okay. Control how writes are applied to the backend database using your own API. And they have this live demo that you can test out, with the user A and user B. And, if they don't have internet, if they have internet, and different operations and things like that. And so here we have why local first architecture, real-time data streaming, always available, works offline, control data privacy, instantly reactive UI, multi-user collaboration, start local only or local first. Okay. So let's go ahead and log in to my account and let me show you how you can set this up for your apps. Now, when you log in, you are shown this screen right here. And so the first thing that you're seeing is you're seeing the various things that you can do. But right here, front and center, you're going to be seeing your instances. Okay. Now I already have an instance that I have configured, that I have set up, and I'm going to be showing you how it works. But what you need to do is you need to go into manage instances, and you need to click here, and you need to create a new instance. Okay. So once you do that, you're going to be seeing a screen that looks something like this. Okay. Now this PowerSync instance will eventually need to be connected to your backend. Now, in my case, I have a Supabase database that I have set up that I want to use for my remote database. And so here I am in my Supabase dashboard, and I have all kinds of projects. And for the purpose of this tutorial, we're using this project right here. And so what you want to do is you want to go into project settings, and you want to go into data API, and you're going to be seeing all these settings that you eventually need to link to your instance. And so if I need to create an instance, right, I go over here and I say, well, this is my instance A1. That's going to go ahead and create it. And here, what I want to do is I want to add a connection. Okay. I'm going to select Postgres here. And here I need to fill everything out, right? So if I go back to my Supabase over here, I can click on connect. And what I want to do is I want to select this right here. Okay. So I have my parameters over here. I have my host, I have my port, I have my database, I have my user, and the password is never shown. But if you forget your password, you can simply change it over here, right? So you can go to your database here and you can click on reset database password and you can enter a new one. Okay, no problem at all. And so over here, when you're selecting this new instance, you need to provide all of this data here, right? You need to fill out all of these fields here. And when you do that, it's going to actually tell you that, hey, are you trying to set up a Supabase instance? And you say yes. And then it's going to configure it to work with a Supabase instance. Okay. And then you can do test connection. And that should be successful. Now, over here, we have two tabs. We have SQL query and we have sync rules. Now, if I go into SQL query, I can execute queries directly on my remote Supabase instance, right? So if I go back to Supabase and I go into my table editor, I have lots and lots of tables, but the table in question that we're going to be dealing with is a simple to-dos, right? So here I have a list of to-dos. And we have a bunch of to-dos over here. We have some randomly generated names. We have this done, whether they're completed or not. And if I go back here, I can execute this query here, and that's going to pull up my data. As you can see, we have all of this data here. And so we know that the sync works. And so at this point, we know that we have a reliable connection. Everything works correctly. Now, you can also click on sync rules, and that's going to open up this file over here. And here is where you can specify rules, right? So if you want to sync all the rows, if you want to sync only some of the rows, you can also sync rows belonging to the user. Okay. So you can say, well, I want to sync rows, only, belonging to the user that's logged in, right? So we have this request user ID. And so that way you can do some interesting kind of syncing. But in our demo, we're just syncing all the rows just to keep things very, very simple, for testing. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to build an app and configure our app to talk to PowerSync. Okay, so it talks to PowerSync so that it's able to sync our remote database. And so you can learn more about it by clicking on Docs. Now, if you scroll down, you have these integration guides, right? We have Supabase PowerSync. We also have FlutterFlow and PowerSync, right? So you can actually read how to configure FlutterFlow to work with PowerSync, right? There's native integration that's possible, okay? And so you can kind of learn more about it, right? It kind of tells you what you need to do. There's lots of things happening. And to save the time, I actually went ahead and I built an entire app that does the syncing for you. I'm going to be making that app available to our amazing Patreon subscribers. And so that way you can get started very, very quickly and easily and start building on top of this app. And so now I'm going to go ahead and log into my FlutterFlow account so that I can show you how this demo works. All right, so here I am in my FlutterFlow dashboard and I built this app right here. So we're going to open this app so that you can see how it's built. All right, so I have my app open right here, and this is an app that's always on. Okay, that's why I called it always on app. And we have a to-do list that will work regardless if you have internet or not. And if you lose internet, that's fine. And once you regain internet, it's going to sync everything correctly. Okay. Now, before I show you how I build this app, let me show you how this app works. Now, instead of testing this app right here in FlutterFlow, a much better way to test this app would be on a simulator. And so to do that, you want to click over here and you want to follow the instructions. Okay. So one way to do it is by doing it in your terminal, right? You can simply copy this command, export all the code, and then run it in a simulator. Another thing that you can do is you can click over here and you can do something called FlutterFlow local run. Okay. You can simply click over here. That's going to open up the desktop app version of FlutterFlow, and you can test it out right here. And that is exactly what I did. I went ahead, downloaded the code, opened it up on my computer. This is the app right here. And I also have an Android simulator running right here. This is actually a Pixel 8 Pro simulator. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run this app on this simulator and show you how it works. All right. So now we have this app running and there's a couple of things happening right here. First, we have a list of to-dos. Now this list of to-dos is stored locally within the local SQLite database provided by PowerSync. Okay. And we can do all kinds of interesting operations here. We can create a new item, we can update it, we can delete it. Now, another important thing is that we are logged in, right? We're using Supabase authentication. And so our syncing mechanism understands who the user is, right? It understands who is the user that's logged in. So you can take that into account. Another thing that we have here is we have some indications here, right? We have a status for connection and we have a status for syncing. Right now you can see that both are green, which means that we're both online and we have successfully synced everything, right? We are keeping track of that as well so that, we can show to the user if it's important in our app. And so now I can do some interesting things, right? I can delete all that, right? I can delete stuff. And let's say if I do it quickly, you might see this syncing indicator change, right? So if I do it slowly, it doesn't change because it happens very, very quickly. But if I do it quickly, you see now it's red because it needs to sync. And at some point it's going to sync, okay? Because it batches them together and now it's green again. And same thing if I do deletes quickly, you see how it becomes red for a couple of moments and becomes green again. And that is because it's batching them, right? So if I'm doing something very, very quickly, it doesn't make sense to sync it quickly, right? It makes sense to kind of store them as transactions and then do it when the app is less busy, right? So if I do that again, I do the same thing here, okay? And that's gonna eventually sync as well. I can do updates, I can click over here, I can do updates. If I do updates quickly, you're gonna be seeing that changing, okay? Now, all of that is obviously happening on our local database, but it's also syncing to our remote Supabase. Okay, so let me show you our remote Supabase so that you have a better idea what's happening. All right, so I went ahead and opened up our remote Supabase instance. This is our to-dos, and that way you can see real-time syncing. So as you can see right now, we have the exact same data, right? And so let's say I delete an item. I deleted DH, right? This thing should be removed, and it is removed probably because when I refresh it, it is gone. Right? Let's say I delete everything except one item. Okay. So let me go ahead and refresh it here. And we have just one item. Let's say I update this and I change the name and this should be, set to something else and it is set to something else. Now let's say I create multiple items. Okay. I'm going to wait for it to sync. It should be syncing right now. And now it is synced. And if I refresh it right here, we have all of these items over here. Okay. Now, we also have the reverse sync, okay? This app is going to pull up data from Supabase, right? In a situation where we have maybe a document that's being edited by multiple people, and we need to have these client apps pull in the latest changes. Okay, so let's say I delete everything except this one, starting with FP. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of this over here. And now you can see that we only have one item over here. Okay. And so I can keep going. Let's say I create a new item, new row, and this is bool is true. I do that. And you see it appears automatically over here. Okay. If I do that again, same thing is going to happen. Let's say this is BBB now. This is true. It is complete. I click save and it appears here automatically. Okay. And if I create items here, they're going to appear here as well when I hit refresh. Okay. And so this syncing is bi-directional, right? Anything I do here, it appears here, obviously, but it also syncs here. And anything that happens here is synced back here. Now, let me show you a couple of interesting scenarios. Okay. Let's say that, I create a lot of these. Okay, I'm going to wait for it to sync. Now it is synced. I come over here. It syncs it back. And let's say we lose internet connection. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my menu over here. I'm going to click here and I'm going to simulate, a situation where we don't have access to the internet. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to click done. I'm going to click back here. And now, as you can see, we don't have internet and we don't also have syncing, right? Because we can't guarantee syncing if we don't have internet. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of these items, maybe except for one. I'm going to click here and I'm working with my local DB. We can't sync. That is why you're seeing here. That is okay. I'm going to delete all of these. Okay. So now we have just one left. If I refresh it here, this is not synced because we don't have internet. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to click on the internet and I'm going to enable it. Okay. And now what we have is we have internet, right? And we have syncing, which means that if I refresh it, everything is disappeared because it's synced it automatically to Supabase once we regain internet. Okay. And the same thing is going to happen if we do it on this side. So if I create a new record here, it's going to automatically appear here, right? So if I go in here and I say true and I hit save, it appears here. But let's say we disconnect this app from the internet, right? Click over here, disconnect it. Now we are disconnected. Syncing is not guaranteed. I'm going to go ahead and insert a couple of records here. I'm going to do CCC. I'm going to do CCC and I'm going to do, you guessed it, DDD. Okay. As well. And let's do one more. EEE, another important task. Okay, so now we have a bunch of tasks that are not reflected here because this app is offline. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it back to the internet. Okay, click over here, reconnect it. And as you can see, now we have all the data synced back from this app over here. We have all the 5 elements here and I can delete them. It is synced. I can come back over here and it is deleted here. Okay. And so we have a true always on app, okay? It doesn't matter what happens to the internet. We're always going to be up to date with everything. And the user is never going to feel that, hey, I disconnected from the internet. I cannot work, right? The user will always be able to work. They will always be able to complete their tasks regardless of what happens with the internet. And this is awesome. And this is extremely useful for all kinds of apps, especially in situations where users do not have internet access, right? These specialized apps, but also general apps that need this connectivity, right? You see that all the time using Google Docs or using another app and it tells you, hey, you're disconnected from the internet, or using a mobile banking app, it tells you you're disconnected to the internet. Your changes may not have been committed, right? You're not guaranteed to have your changes saved. Okay. And so now let me go ahead and show you how I've implemented this app. Okay. All right. So here we are back in FlutterFlow. And remember, for our amazing Patreon subscribers, you're going to get access to this app right here. You'll be able to view it on the screen just like I'm viewing it right now. You'll be able to clone it. You'll be able to do whatever you want. And so if you want to build apps like this, you definitely want to be able to get access to this app. So definitely check out our amazing Patreon community. Now, the first thing that you want to do is you definitely want to review this documentation. Okay. I actually did it my own way that I'm going to be showing you, but you definitely want to read this documentation. And so the first thing that I did was I created app state for my app. So if you go over here, we have this to-do items, right? And we have this to-do item, which is a custom data type that has ID, name, created, and done. And this mirrors my Supabase data, right? So ID, created, name, done. Okay. I needed to make sure that I'm able to represent each of these records in FlutterFlow, right? Then I went to app state and I created an app state variable called to-do items, which is a list of this data to-do item. Okay. Next, I also configured a couple of variables here that we can show on our app to let the user know what's happening, right? Is synced and is online. I set these both to true. They're just starting out as true, right? We're assuming that the user has the internet and we're assuming that it is synced correctly. The app is obviously going to manage these, so it's going to change them as it sees fit. And the next thing that I did was I created custom actions. Okay, so I have a custom action for add item, delete item, list items, and update item. Okay, and that is because we need to be working with this, built-in SQLite database. Okay, so for add item, we just get the to-do name, and here I'm just doing db execute, which is I'm just entering a SQL query to create a new record. Okay, and then I'm just returning the new ID. And importantly, I'm also using this FFapp state that I talked about in many other videos that allows me to access my app state. And I'm basically creating this item here. And the reason I need to be working with my app state is because all of this is app state, right? If I want it to be reactive, I need to make sure that I'm working with app state. If you're not familiar, how app state works, and reactivity and all of that, and the importance and why it's key to making your apps behave in a robust fashion, definitely check out this video that you're going to be seeing in the corner of your screen. Okay. And so all of this is app state. And so we need to make sure that we work with this local database and we work with the app state. So here I'm just adding this item to app state. And this basically refreshes the app state. Okay. And the same thing for delete. I'm deleting an item and I'm deleting from app state and I'm doing this notify listeners, which refreshes the page where that, app state resides. Okay. And here I am listing the items from the database. And here I'm doing an update, right? I have the SQL. I'm updating my app state. I'm notifying the listeners so that everything refreshes. That needs to be refreshed. That's dependent on this app state. Okay. And so when we go to our app over here, we have this list view. Now this list view, right? The first thing that's happening is when the page loads, we're executing this custom action. Okay. And when we get this output, the data from our embedded database, we are setting it to app state. Okay. We're basically loading this app state. And that way, when we display this list view, right, we just display it from the app state, because we only want to work with app state. When it concerns UI, you only want to be working with app state, typically in these situations, because that way your app becomes reactive. It works really, really well. Okay. And here we have new item, right, that executes add item. I just create a random task. And here we have two icons that change the color depending on is online, if the app is online, and if the app is synced. Okay. And that is why you're seeing that behavior. If you do it, if you do many operations, it might batch them. So it's not going to be synced, but then it's going to sync when the app is less busy. Now, one of the most important pieces to this app is this init sync that I have here, right? This is a special custom action that we create the code here, but then in our main Dart, we can add it here, right? I'm adding it as a final because I want everything else before it to initialize, right? The FlutterFlow stuff. And I add it so that it initializes last, right? This init sync. This is a special one. And this is where a lot of magic happens. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to define our schema, right? I'm saying this is my schema. It's to-dos. We have created that. We have name and we have done. You do not need to include the ID column because it's automatically added by PowerSync. And you can ignore all of this kind of red underline. It's absolutely fine. The app works perfectly. It's no issue at all. And so once we have our schema, if we go all the way down, you can see that what we need to do is we need to initialize our PowerSync database, right? We need to initialize with its schema. We have the path, which is where the file is. Then we have initialized. Now it's initialized true. And then what we're doing is we're listening for network changes. And we're also listening to see if the user is going to log in, because remember, PowerSync needs to know who the user is. And so we're listening for Supabase events to see when the user is logged in, right? When the user logs in, we need to tell PowerSync that, hey, the user has logged in. This is the name of the user. And that way, those sync rules come into effect, right? It's able to sync correctly. Okay. Here we are also listening for Supabase changes, right? So this is the situation where Supabase gets updated and we need to sync our local data. And so this essentially allows us bi-directional changes, because when the user is working with the app, we are working with the local database and we're working with the app state. Okay. And so that is fine. We don't even need the internet. But because we are using Supabase as our backend that we need to sync to, we need to be listening for Supabase events, right? And so over here, we have this handle Supabase change, right? And so what it's doing is when Supabase change happens, right? We're using real-time Supabase over here, because when we go to our Supabase, we have this real-time turned on. What it's doing is it's notifying our system, right? Because we're listening for these events. And so if there's an insert, we do something. If there's an update, we do something. And we're basically telling PowerSync, hey, this thing happened. And PowerSync is going to make all of that work together. It's going to reconcile the changes. It's going to batch events. And as you saw in our demo, it works really, really well. And so you can take a look at this code over here. You can also feed it to ChatGPT or your favorite LLM if you want to make changes, or you can kind of make changes yourself. You know, it depends what you're most comfortable with. But that is the approach that I picked, and this approach works really, really well. And I also recommend that you check out FlutterFlow and PowerSync integration guide over here. This is their official guide, and that way you can learn how they did it. I actually did it my own way because I wanted to be done a certain way, and as you saw, it's an approach that works. The app works flawlessly. It's able to sync everything correctly. And so you can have a combination. You can take a look how I did it, and you can also take a look at what they recommend over there, and then you can kind of decide the approach that you want to take. But regardless of how you implement it, you definitely want to be thinking about this approach when you're building your apps, right? Especially with apps that rely on, you know, synchronization from a remote source, but also with apps that need to remain functional when there is no internet, right? In situations where, you know, you disconnect mobile stuff, in situations where you're building specific apps where users might be in a remote area. Maybe, you know, they're working underground. Maybe they're on some ships, you know, out there, and they don't have internet, right? There's all kinds of interesting use cases where building an always on app is going to be super helpful, and you can easily do it thanks to PowerSync. So definitely check it out. Check out our amazing Patreon community if you want to clone this app. If you want to get your hands on this app, you want to test it out. And in fact, you'll be able to clone this app and play with it and see how things work. And then you'll be able to tweak it and kind of learn more about kind of the inner workings and how everything kind of comes together. So definitely check out our amazing Patreon community. If you want to master FlutterFlow, check out our amazing training, Mastering FlutterFlow. And if you want to master Supabase, which is what we use in pretty much all our apps, check out our amazing flagship training called Mastering Supabase, and you'll be able to find the links to our amazing Patreon community and our trainings in the description below the video.